Antónia Zegers. So, Pablo, how did you and Gael meet?
We met at a party, a Canada party in Mexico, in Toronto in 2008. It was a long party, a good one. A good Mexican party, you know.
We continued, no? In Bolivia.
Yeah.
The party, yeah. We met in, I was shooting a movie in Cochabamba, in Bolivia, and they just finished writing. Ah, okay, yeah. Hello, Cochabamba. And yeah, Pablo and Dios came, his brother, the producer of the film, they came to Cochabamba, and it was coincidentally my birthday, so it was a weekend of craziness. And we talked about the movie, we managed to talk about the movie.
You said now, because I guess in 2008 you were in Toronto with Tony Manero, right? And you were thinking about this movie even then?
Yeah, it took us a while to make this project. Basically because when the first idea came up and the possibility to make this movie, it was quite scary. This is a very sort of important issue in my country. So you just don't deal with the no just because you want to, make a movie out of it. So when we got the idea, this is our idea, basically, the starting point. So it took us a while to say, yes, and then we said, yeah, let's do it. And we just decided to. And it took us a while to talk to everybody, then develop the project, write the script, do the whole research.
How long did the script writing part take you?
From 2008. Yeah, 4 years.
Because we were talking before we got started, this feels like a trilogy between Tony Manero, Postmortem, and this movie. They're all about how pop culture can be corrupted by politics, which is a really interesting way to think.
Or how politics could be corrupted by pop culture.
But this is your movie. So, but to tie those two things together, where does that idea come from for you to do that? Because it's an unusual thing to do.
I'm interested in media, basically, and I think media it's probably a major issue in our culture, and I think everything goes through media somehow. And when the political communications meets the advertising communication, all kind of things happen. The worst things and the best things. This is an example of how we could actually use in a very positive way. The advertising logic into political. But if you see most of the campaigns in the past years all over the world, it's probably not a good example of how to do it. Because what happens is that the image is just more important than ideas. We've been talking about what I remember looking at the debate that I had here between Obama and Rubio, the first one. And then you see all the major TV channels and the press. They were all talking about that Rubio was better because he was, nervous, like Obama was here and there. And what about the ideas? What were these guys talking about? So just the image is just more important than words. And that's something that is interesting.
And that's something that's been kind of key to all these movies you've made, again, between Tony Manero and Postmortem, which I really love, by the way, because it's kind of like the end of hope in Chile, sort of the end of Allende, and the beginning of Pinochet. This idea that basically communication is something that people pay attention to more than ideas is something you've always been thinking about, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's. I grew up in a dictatorship, and they handled everything. The propaganda was very strong, and so when I became an adult, I just started to figure out that they just create not only a violent environment, but also they would control what you think, what you know, which is way more dangerous. And that's why when the No campaign was aired, it was so fresh, it was amazingly unique and new, and it just created a whole atmosphere. It was not only about politics, about theatre. It was also about how you make a sense in life. It was amazing. I was only 12, and I remember when the campaign was there. I don't remember much details, but I remember how beautiful was the sensation that we were watching on TV something that was finally positive, you know, and it would encourage people. And we were talking about rainbows. There were people dancing on bridges, and we had mimes, you know, and it was a whole new thing, you know. Yeah.
Do you remember this as well, Antonio? Do you remember those commercials?
Yeah, I was older than, I'm still older than Pablo. Doesn't change, I think. But I was on the street the same day my character got caught in that last manifestation. It was the last manifestation of the campaign, but the first legal, comillas, legal, not cops were waiting like around the corner, but legal manifestation before the referendum. And I couldn't vote, but I was in the street because no one was like, oh, today you can be like beyond politics, but in those times was, I think, the last times in the world that ideas still like have something because the world was changing. There was a wall that went down with all ideas, not just for Chile, I think. Like.
But it must have been really exciting to be there, though. Just sort of, even with the idea of freedom, even though, as you were saying, it wasn't really freedom, but just this idea must have been an exciting thing to have.
Because the first idea, before knowing what are you going to do with a new democracy, that is another problem, the first idea was to take out that bastard. That was the first thing, and we were all together for that. We want that guy away first. And what happened then, well, everything was not a rainbow. We can tell it now in my country after 20 years. It's not so easy. Power, like people get used to power, so say, well, let's make things in the way that is possible. And a lot of failures in our democracy. But the first idea who get the people in the street and who put the people together was to take that guy away, and happiness came.
Yeah, we felt the same way about Romney, so it's great. But Gael, you've got a number of films where the politics have been kind of important. Morris Perros and Barral, and was that important to you too, to do another film that dealt with political life as well as the lives of the citizens?
Well, I mean, it is a constant thing, definitely, in most of the films that I've ended up participating in. But I don't see it as if there was any checklist or, you know, like, is there a political thing? No, you know, I never kind of really detach and see that. You know, I think there is one thing that comes with the whole package, which is that in Latin America politics are very much in the surface. No? So everything you do is political. It has political complexity, and it's very much in the semantic even. You know, it's in the constant narrative. It's not as detached as other places, more Anglo places where politics is like going to play tennis. You know, it's like, oh, I'm going to politics, and like, you know, like you go to politics and then you come back home and there's no politics there. You know? So it's
I never heard it put that way before.
But I've heard people say, like, I'm going to do some political stuff and then come back. You know, it is. So
that's the Anglos, though. It's not us. That's okay.
We know what we're talking about. So the thing is that in Latin America, it's very difficult to disassociate that. But then, just by saying that, immediately comes up like, well, whenever there's a confrontation of ideas, which is perhaps one of the bases of conflict and drama, you know? Because, I mean, any story or any narrative kind of develops that in a sense, in a very tangential way or very direct way. Well, there is a political complexity to that, because the confrontation of ideas is political by itself. So it has a sexual, a religious, a spiritual complexity, the same as it has a political one. So I always think that it is impossible to detach from that, and not only that, it's very difficult it would be a mistake, I think, to not acknowledge that layer and not to enjoy it, because there is much to discover there, you know, and the characters there is like it's very difficult sometimes to have this kind of classical journey of the motivation of the character, where it's going, you know, and like interpreting a character, but the politics of a character, you can kind of understand them, because they are kind of, they evolve, they reinvent themselves every day, with every scene, in a sense. So I think it is a much more, it is a consequence of just making films that they become political. Like, it's not.
But it seems like it's a consequence for you, and also so many of these characters you play have been involved in these really key transitional moments. I mean, The Crime of Father Tomorrow, or again, Amores Perros, or even Bad Education. There's been these big transitional moments in the culture that these guys are kind of caught up in, and I wonder if that's something that attracts you too.
It is. It's. I think undoubtedly it is. I mean, I cannot say that. Again, I don't do it perhaps consciously enough, but if I look back on it and I go, oh yeah, there is a kind of a line there, and I guess it has to do as well with a kind of with a sense that when I always tell this anecdote that when we did Amores Perros, the last day of shooting, I said to the producers, give me at the end, can you give me a VHS tape, you know, just so that my parents can see it. Yeah, really. I mean, it was impossible that these films were shown in the cinemas, no? I mean, like, you never thought that these films were going to go out into the cinema or into the world, rather. So there is many stories that are kept in a kind of you know, what is it called? That express pan. You know, it's boiling. You know, this kind of things and issues that are boiling, and all of a sudden comes this film that deals about this or that issue, and it's like, oh man, this is going to be the first film that talks about this, or it's going to be like the third or the fourth film that talks about this, but there's still many things to mention around it. So I think it is a consequence as well of this kind of impossibility of being able to express in a free cinematic way, in an abstract, perhaps hopefully artistic consequence, you know, an artistic way, and I really enjoy that, because it kind of feeds my curiosity for politics, which I have a lot in my life. I'm really interested in that. Yes.